rock and roll. Welcome, everyone. Very briefly, my name is Jen Brown. I am actually the lead trainer and curriculum designer here at Renew US. A little bit about Renew US. I'm actually just going to go ahead and drop some information in the chat. We do a lot of things. Our biggest thing probably is to build progressive people power on a state and local level. We are working in 12 to 14 states for the 2022 cycle, and it is all about building that multiracial working class power. And so we also, aside from these amazing programs that you're participating in randomly during the week, we have a campaign manager training program. It's an 8-week program. I dropped a one-pager. Definitely dig into that if you're interested in leveling up any of your campaign skills, because today we are digging hard into social media strategy, specifically digging into content and content calendars for the next hour. So our agenda today, it is a lot, but we are going to get through it. We're going to dig into introductions. That was me. Please drop your name, your pronouns, and where you're from in the chat to see if we have any synergetic connections occurring. We'll do a brief grounding, and then we'll start digging into your social media audience, your voice as a social media person or running any sort of social media for yourself campaign, whether it be electoral or issue-based. Then we'll think on ladder of engagements, content and content calendars, and tips to make the most of your social media adventure. Very briefly, just think about right now, why are you taking time out of your day to fight for something? And what that is that you're fighting for. For me, I have been involved on the side, I would say, for quite some time in politics, up until the last maybe 7 years, where I didn't think I really mattered. I didn't think I had a voice prior to the last 7 or 8 years. And then something clicked where I realized that if I wasn't going to be involved, who would be? Specifically, a lot of that comes around housing work here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I'm at. I've been housing insecure growing up. My parents did not have the best of marriages, which is the understatement of the year. And there was a period of time that we lived in a hotel, actually, in order to avoid a restraining order that was out against my dad, or I should say, in order to avoid a court order that was out against my dad after he had abused both me and my mom. It was really frustrating for me because as a kid, I was like, why can't we just leave him? Like, why can't we just leave and find somewhere else to go? And my mom didn't have any resources. She didn't know any work history. My mom didn't graduate from high school. So we were stuck in this situation because we didn't have anywhere to live. So we had to do exactly what my dad at the time, a very abusive man, was asking for. So I am fighting for fair housing, honestly, fair, free, non-commodified housing for everyone, because I think housing is a human right. And there's so many things that are held into place because of either someone's lack of housing, dependence on pieces of housing, or dependence on aspects of the system where they have to stay in certain situations because they don't want to go through that struggle to find new housing. So take a moment to really ground yourself into why you are here, why you are fighting for something. Maybe that is running for office, working for an organization, getting involved in whatever situation, issue-based electoral campaign you are. And just take some time to really digest that. What does that look like for you? And I like to ground people in whatever they're fighting for and whatever they're digging into, because all aspects of running campaigns, either electoral or issue-based, can get really hard and can get really exhausting. So I encourage everyone in any work that you're doing, have a reminder somewhere. whether that be a little post-it on the side of your computer screen, whether that be something that pops up in your notifications of this is what you're doing. Because that day-to-day slog through things can get really, really heavy. And there's different ways it comes out, right? You think about social media though, like let's ground it specifically in today. Social media voice generally is your voice if you're running the account. If you are feeling hopeless, that voice comes across as hopeless. If you are feeling misguided, not directed, all over the place, that can't find a place of let's get people active, let's get people doing stuff, because you feel lost. So just remind yourself whenever you're feeling something is going on where you don't feel as grounded as you could, what is that thing that you're fighting for? We like to share axioms here at Renew. Our axiom today for this class is people power must be visible to have an impact. So thinking about what that may mean to you, people power must be visible to have an impact. I picked it very specifically because social media needs to be social to have an impact, right? And just to dive in immediately, all social media is not good social media, clearly, and it is not good for you. So we are going to be very, very targeted on ways to create healthy social media for your campaign, either electoral, issue-based for you as a brand, whatever that looks like. I am a big component of making sure social media is healthy. And when I say that, a lot of times I dig into the audience. So that has to be your very first question. Before you think about platform, anything, who are you trying to reach? You need to think of that person or groups of people before anything gets started. Your audience is not everyone. It cannot be everyone. If your audience is everyone, it's actually no one. So you think about how you speak to, I always give the example, how you may talk to a kid versus an adult. You're probably not speaking in the same ways. I know that's a very rudimentary example, but you have to think of people as individuals and groups of individuals versus just like a slog of people. So some ways to start thinking about your audience that I think are really effective: start breaking it down to the people you're trying to reach. Now, you might have different pockets or buckets of people. In each, I want you to think about these following things. So you're thinking about how old they may be. Now, this is not an exact number. You're not like, okay, our audience is mean age is 22.753. No, you can break it up in generation. If you're like, oh, okay, we've got some older adults, we've got some younger, what is it now, Gen Zers that know how to do all the amazing social media mastery. You've got the elder millennials like me hanging out on places like Twitter, getting slightly involved with things like TikTok. But thinking about those age brackets, you'll probably talk to them a little differently. After you're digging into age brackets, look at some other things. So you're looking at race, you're looking at identity are the next two. I say this very specifically because with race and identity, you want to make sure that you are connecting with people again. You're not talking to everyone in the same way. As someone from the Midwest, I'd say things constantly like, hey guys, how's it going? Okay, everyone is not a guy, but as a Midwest, I know that in my head, but saying, hey guys, how's it going, can shut off other people who don't identify as a guy and don't understand the slang in the Midwest. So just thinking about how you're going to reach each of those groups with the language you're using. This is why this audience sort of identification is really important. After you're going from there, you're thinking about their location, their interests, their worries, and their goals. So if you're running, say, an issue-based campaign, you're probably looking to change the lives of the people that you're communicating with on social media. Now, some of these people might be individuals that will be directly affected by the change you're working on. Some of these people might be interested in getting involved in making the change happen. And some of these people might be thinking, I don't really know about this change or this problem even, but they're people that are aware of their community. So they're not quite aware of the issue, but they're invested in their community. So right there, those are three separate audiences. I like to jot down, I call it this like word vomit around audiences, have these things on the screen and start writing things, characteristics out, and then separating these audiences out. What this is going to do is really help you plan your content, because then, and I'm jumping slightly ahead of myself, if you know who you're talking to, what they're worried about, what their goals are, you can create wording, posts, videos that speaks directly to that individual. People want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to know you're fighting for them. You need to know who them are. Now, taking that issue-based aside and say you're thinking about an electoral campaign, maybe you are the voice of a candidate, or maybe you are the voice of the campaign. You still need to talk to individuals as individuals. You cannot be talking to an entire group, because everything you have to say probably doesn't affect everyone in that group. If someone lives in an apartment versus being a homeowner, those are two different brackets of audiences. I wish the best of luck and wonderful things for all my homeowner friends. I have different issues living in an apartment. Vice versa, homeowners may not be concerned about the fact, like saying North Carolina directly, because I'm here, we don't have a lot of rights for tenants. So homeowners might be like, oh, I'm unaware, and I don't know if I really am bothered by it. Whereas people who live in rental situations care about the fact that rent can't necessarily, like rent has no cap. It can go up at any time in between leases and any amount. So really digging in, I think after you get past those first like demographic sort of questions to the interests, worries, and goals. And then of course I have that whatever else matters in there is key to understanding your audience. Now, audience, I'm very like, this is your first step before you even think about yourself. So you also have to think about where they live. And that doesn't mean necessarily locationally. What does that mean via platform? So Facebook is kind of that all-encompassing platform. I would recommend that you should be on this platform, even if it's a formality. It's a good place to store events. It's a good place for information. Generally speaking, when someone's looking something up, they're hitting a Google search of like, here's my organization, or here's a candidate, or here's a person you're looking for. And the Facebook will generate in the algorithm of Google pretty high up. So when I say algorithm, Facebook's algorithm is also kind of trash. We're not going to dig super into it, but it changes on a daily basis. We'll think about engagement and conversation at the end of this session, but Facebook is one of those places that is a good placeholder. We'll talk about scheduling content. You might not get a lot of interaction and conversation on Facebook, but a lot of audiences live there, even if it's just to have a profile to keep in touch with people from the past or families or chosen families. Now you go to Instagram. Instagram's a maybe for everyone. If you are not generating images, if you are not generating videos and don't have the time to dedicate to that, it doesn't matter if your audience lives there or not, you should not be on Instagram. Instagram is image driven. Instagram is becoming a little video and image driven, like they're favoring those short stories, I should say, or reels, what they're called, Instagram lives, things like that. But if you don't have access to images, Instagram will be very, very difficult for you. There's a trend happening right now on Instagram where they're literally like taking screenshots of tweets and putting it on Instagram. I'll be honest, I've totally done that for brands that I manage and for organizations I manage. And we'll talk when I say brand in a moment. If it's on brand, if it is you and seems real and resonates with your audience, great. You cannot make a whole Instagram off of screenshots of text. So Instagram audiences, they're very visual. They like the photos. If you can't provide those photos, you're wasting your time and spinning your wheels on Instagram. Twitter has a lot of upkeep. I think it's worth it for conversations. I think Twitter is a really interesting platform to have back and forth communication with people, especially people who are progressively aligned. Twitter can become a bit of an echo chamber depending on how you're curating your followers and your list and your audiences. A lot of times, if people are progressive, we all kind of follow the same accounts. That being said, you can think about how you're agitating people. You can think about how you're cultivating a relationship with these individuals because they are on Twitter and they are communicating in conversation. So thinking about Twitter's audience, I think it's actually pretty wide. There's quite a few Gen X, not a ton of boomers. There's a decent amount on there. A lot of Gen X, a lot of millennials, and lower happening or earlier generation. I don't want to say lower because that's not the right way to say it, but younger generation. There we go. So thinking about what that looks like, yes, it can be an echo chamber. Yes, it can be a lot of work. It's a good place to start finding some people because there are so many progressive voices on Twitter. Snap, TikTok, video. This is if you're targeting those audiences. Again, if you're having a goal with your post, and we'll talk about that, and your audience lives on these video-based platforms like Snapchat or TikTok, absolutely fantastic. If they don't, and it is just adding work to what you're doing, and you are stressing about creating video and snappy content and keeping up to it, don't bother with Snapchat or TikTok. I tell folks, you want to pick like one, maybe two that you can do really, really well and connect with an audience. You will not be able to tell if you're doing well on social media for about, I would say, 2 to 3 months of you digging into that platform. That first week, that first month and a half, you're getting your foot and your voice and understanding your audience. You will not be able to tell if it's working until 2 to 3 months into it. That's why I say don't pick them all, because if you pick them all, you're going to end up stressing yourself out and you're going to end up with really, really thin relationships and not a lot of communication and conversation. So when you're thinking about your audience, and that again cannot be a one-time thing, like word vomit it out, pick a platform you're going to start with. Then you start to think about yourself and what your voice is. So I say yourself. Think about why, in what capacity you're here today. Are you here to learn how to run a social media account better for yourself, for an organization, for a candidate, for you as a candidate, for you as a job seeker, for a campaign, and really isolate that reason? Let's take an organization as an example, because truly this can apply to anything. You could say, let's take an individual as an example. The first thing you're going to need to do is think about your voice and describe it. Meaning, what does it sound like? Is it serious? Is it urgent? Is it using a bunch of buzzwords and fun words? We'll talk about skipping the jargon of things. Does it use exclamation points? Does it share silly stories and gifs? Does it drop memes? Is it all business? So really taking some time, and I highly recommend like digging into a list of adjectives and start pulling them out to describe your voice. Meaning you go on, like you can Google adjective list, which is a good way to start. Pull out maybe 15. Out of those 15, cut it down to about 4 to 6. And that is how you start developing your brand voice. Now, brand, we think, listen, I hate capitalism, not a fan. I'm a socialist by all means, tear down capitalistic notions. A brand voice is a really good way to describe what you're creating here with a social media voice, because you think about organizations and companies that are very on brand. And when they do something off brand, you're bothered by it. A good example, something that's not related to politics at all, Taco Bell's branding. Taco Bell has the most ridiculous social media voice. And you think about some of the stuff they're doing, they have a taco subscription. They have like sauce with little snappy phrases on it. Everything that Taco Bell does as a brand on social media, you're like, oh yeah, makes sense. They're not telling you the caloric content of each of their tacos. They're not telling you the most healthy taco to eat. They're talking about satisfying cravings and getting your taco fix and things like that. So you think about like how you might describe Taco Bell's brand. You might describe it as fun, silly, sassy, snappy, spicy, like these words that resonate also with what you think of their food sometimes and things like that. It very cohesive. You aren't Taco Bell. Your campaign, your candidate, your issue isn't Taco Bell. So what is unique about you? What are the kinds of things that you might share? What are the kinds of things that are representative of your organization? Now, I do the social media now for Renew. And so thinking about the things we stand for, people power, multiracial, working class, absolutely. We have training programs, super important. We also agree with certain politicians or have a lot of alignment with folks like Bernie Sanders, Nina Turner. We also feel there's a democracy for all, an education for all, a healthcare for all. We're also a little goofy and a little, for those of you that know us through the campaign manager program, we're a little funny, we're a little funky. You know, we're about breaking down the status quo. So we would share something a little silly. We would share something that is more entertainment focused, but still aligns with who we are. So thinking about that adjective list and really defining your voice, this is more important than a lot of times, like how big your audience is. Your audience and knowing who they are is important. How you're speaking to them is how you continue to get folks who believe in what you're doing and that are your target audience over to your side or over to liking your page, interacting with your posts, and then agitating them to being involved, giving money when you're asking for it, volunteering with you. The voice, we need to know who you are. And this is why I get like my head explodes when people are like, oh, we'll just let an intern do the social media. And there's no like branding or anything else to help that intern. It's just like, oh, just post. It's cool. Just post. Go ahead. Don't do that. So with your branding and with your who you are in social media voice, jot some of these things down so there's a record of it. If you run social media for your organization or for, say, a candidate or a campaign, have that adjective list available. Have the types of information you share. If you're not an organization that would ever share news, don't share news then. If it's you're only sharing news that has to do specifically with your location of your audience, great. That's the kind of news you want to share. Before I move into like jargon and things to avoid, things like that, I want to say if you're running your personal social media account and you're thinking about your own personal brands, I think it's really important to think about who you're trying to reach on social media and the purpose of it. If this is your own and you're working on developing your voice on social media, Why are you doing it? Is it because you want, some people use their social media as like a diary of their experiences and days, and they don't care who's reading it. Awesome. You have a purpose? Fantastic. If you care who's reading it, you still have to dig into your audience and think about what that means. I meet people from social media consistently. I used to be a speaker. I've done TEDx talks. I ran a company for a decade, did a ton of social media for other organizations. And one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten was meeting someone that knew me on Twitter and said, "Oh, you write exactly how you talk." So I encourage you to think about, if this is your voice you're embodying there, how would people describe you? How would people use different adjectives to say, "Oh, Betsy's like this. Oh, Zakaya is like this." And think about what that is. And that can cross over if you're running a brand too. Clearly, taking over Renew's social media, they're going to have a little bit of zest of Jen in there, because that's how I am. And that's what I'm bringing to the brand. Is it the same as my personal Twitter account? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Are there aspects? Sure thing. So it's really that pick and choosing and seeing what resonates with the audience. When I say skip jargon, we've all been in those spaces where someone uses those terms that you're like, I don't really know if they know the word that they're using, or they're using it and they're not really using it well, or they're being condescending about it. That's what I'm talking about, jargon. You want to talk to people like you talk to people. I think too often with social media, we think sometimes that we're posting something to aim to go viral or aim to get a big response. And a lot of times with social media, the thing that goes viral is not the thing that you tried to make viral or get a big response out of it. It's the everyday sort of commentary, conversation, speaking in your voice, and being true to who you are. Someone from the last cohort actually just went viral on a tweet she did this past weekend. She tweeted that it feels like the country is being run by the Fire Festival bros right now. And she said this, and I was like, that is exactly, I can hear her saying that in her exact voice. It was her through and through. It's funny, it's true. Other people have probably made similar comparisons, but because she said it so nonchalantly and as is, that's why it got the traction, because she doesn't have a huge audience. It's the fact that it was just stated as part of who she is. Now, you think about that with brands, a lot of times people put out these like fancy videos, or they create this clickbaity thing because they think they're going to get traction on it. And that's never the thing that does it. So things that you want to avoid using just for explosiveness: drama, of course. Drama is only fun on the internet when you are reading it, not when you are participating in it. You never want to be the person of the day on Twitter. If you haven't heard that, like you never want to be the person of the day on Twitter at all. So getting involved in that drama, not worth it most of the time. I say most of the time if it is something that you can contribute a piece to. For example, here in North Carolina, Clay Aiken just announced that he is running for North Carolina 6. Maybe you have something you would like to say because of the idea. Here is another, yes, the guy from American Idol, yes, again. And maybe you have something to offer with that. If it's just to be like, "Oh, look at this clown" or something, that's drama and not really worth it. If it's, "Hey, we need to stop having people who are elite in charge or running for office and make it more accessible so everyday people can run for office and not just American Idol contestants or American Idol winners," like maybe that's something you're putting out there. Otherwise, it's like, it's not worth to get involved in that drama. Same thing with clickbait. It's really frustrating to the audience if you write a clickbaity headline that just makes people want to click on it And I understand your need. You want people to click, you want people to dig in, you want people to do the thing on the other end of that link. If it's written as clickbait and it's not a good return from the actual article or thing that you're having them do, you are just pissing off your audience. So it's one of those like, is it worth it? Does it have a good return at the end of it? A lot of times it doesn't, unfortunately. Exclusiveness is another piece of this. You don't want to use kind of an exclusive tone, meaning if you are having a conversation with your audience, you're posting things, having that be like, oh, only for our insiders. If you have like a group of 5 insiders, that's just going to make people feel bad that they're not an insider. Now, if you're talking to, say, a group of members and you're like, our members know we're doing X, Y, and Z, then you're creating that sphere of influence around hands. So there's 3 spheres of influence, 3 reasons why people do things: head, logic, fact, figures; hands, fear of missing out, collective action, we're all in this together; and heart, which is that emotional tug, passion. Using hands as our members got to do this really great, cool thing. If you want to also do this really great, cool thing, you can join us. See how it's balancing that exclusiveness with, hey, come join us with this fear of missing out. Get that action going. So thinking about those spheres of influence, you don't want to be like, oh, fear of missing out. You want to be like, oh, fear of missing out. And here's how you can not miss out again next time. So keeping that openness there in your information that you're putting out on social media. Terms, if you use a term, define it. I say that because I think in leftist spaces, in progressive spaces, we tend to use some terms and like leftist speak that we don't always define. Also, this is really helpful if you are working in a leftist space, campaign, organization, anything like that, and you know you're going up against people who will challenge what you're saying. You don't want to leave room for interpretation if you're using a term that not a lot of people understand. Speak to people how you would speak to people. You did your audience identification in the beginning. If one of your audiences are people you want to get involved in your mission, you cannot term talk them all the time. And then finally, this one's kind of obvious. If you wouldn't say it in real life, don't say it on social media. I have to say that though, because I think so many people are like, oh, I would say this, but maybe I wouldn't do it to the person's face. Don't do that. Like, be who you are, who you are, who you are. You'll hear me talk about being the best version of yourself. And that's something I think is really imperative when you're thinking about what you're putting out. So we haven't even really gotten to the idea of posting yet. I want to touch on the ladder of engagement and give you a resource that some of my campaign manager friends already have. A ladder of engagement is really how you are connecting with the individuals that you have on your social media platform, whatever that platform may be. So this ladder of engagement, it links to a really great article about digital organizing that the Obama campaign did, and really thinking about what their ladder of engagement looked like and how you can adapt it to work for your own. So I don't want to go too much because I'm going to give you this. Clearly, I dropped it in the chat. I'll send it to folks. What I want to say you should spend some time with are these 3 categories of engagement. So there's awareness, connection, and action. When you're brainstorming content, and we'll get to this idea of a content calendar and batching posts and things like that, if your content doesn't do one of those things, it should not be posted. If you are drawing a full-on blank of what to post, visit this page and like specifically this activity, thinking about, okay, what are some posts that will bring awareness to me, to my campaign, to my organization? Great. What are some that will have connection? This is where you can have a little fun. You're connecting with people when you're building relationships. So this might be a little bit of your personality. This might be staff members X favorite Sunday breakfast. This may be our candidates' favorite place to go on the weekend. It can't all be business all the time. And I think that's important to remember, and we'll talk about that momentarily. The last one is action, steps they can take. Watch this video, like us on this other platform, sign up for our mailing list. You'll see how the Obama ladder of engagement is broken down. It was really successful when it came out. There have been steps added in different campaigns, but it follows a really nice through line. So if you're drawing a blank for your own ladder of engagement, how to get people from being simple followers, just being passively involved in your campaign or all the way up to active, whether that be giving money, giving time, this is a really good skeleton to follow. Also, this article is kind of fantastic. So I highly recommend spend some time on this. And it's a good place to give you some bones of how you're engaging with your audience. So I brought up building relationships, and I said it's not business all the time, right? When you're building a relationship with your audience, there's two big questions you want to think about. You want to think about what can you provide your audience and what do they need that you have. So it's not a exclusive like, ooh, I hold all the keys to all the things. It's like, oh, my audience wants to get involved and I have opportunities for them to do it. My audience cares about housing justice and I have ways that they can create active participation. So thinking about what you're offering them, and just to like skim all the way back to this, back on to dig in on your audience, this interests, worries, and goals. If what you're providing connects with one of these three things, you are going to have a really strong audience relationship. Now, when we're thinking about that audience relationship and connecting to those people, that's when I say it's not business all the time. Maybe you're providing them an opportunity to trust you more. Maybe you're providing an opportunity to get to know you more. This is extremely important with individuals, with candidates, and with organizations. So with all of it. If your organization is just organization and we don't know who's on the other side of it, that organization will not have built the amount of trust that it needs to with people to get involved. How many times in the nonprofit world have we seen nonprofits talk about what they're doing for XYZ marginalized community, and there's no members of that actual marginalized community anywhere near that nonprofit? A lot. Maybe you hadn't thought about that before with the nonprofits that you support, whether in your time or with your money. That is why you can establish trust with your audience if you are thinking about who's behind the institution, who's behind the issue, who's behind the organization. And the thing is, if you're coming from a place where you're like, I don't really want to dig into who's behind it. First off, I get it. Take a breath, check yourself, think of how that looks. And then at the same time, think about how you can provide information to your audience and build that relationship. Maybe it's about you, social media person that's on the other side of it. What do you want to tell your audience about you? Don't think, oh, I'm just the social media person. Absolutely not. We connect to people and stories. We do not just connect to an organization that has no face behind it. So in that sense, building relationships, think about how you build relationships with your friends, with partners, with family, with chosen family, and add that to the stuff that you're going to put out in your social media. Because in the end, you're having conversations with your audience. It's just a series of conversation. You're not talking at them. You're talking with them. So a few examples I want to give, I should say one big example. Justin is actually a city council member in New York that I knew when I lived there. Big fan of his. He was city council for my area in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Awesome guy, really fun. This is one of the tweets that he did this past weekend. So I'll read it off. In New York City, the first time you wake up on the subway just before your stop, you're legit. First time a tourist asks you for directions, you're a legend. First time the coffee guy knows how you take it without asking, you become an icon. I don't make the rules. This is just how it is. This has nothing to do with his campaign. Zero. This is 100% his personality. He is a dude from Brooklyn, from Bay Ridge specifically. And for those of you unfamiliar with Bay Ridge, Saturday Night Fever. That is Bay Ridge. It is stuck very much in the past in that sense. Really high, like Russian, Polish, like old neighborhood. Everyone's very, how you doing? Like that is Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, hands down. So this has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with personality. Even the response, once you ride the G train, you're local. Kids today don't know how good they got it. When I was a boy, you'd see the G train, maybe once a year. All personality, all developing relationship, nothing to do with his campaign, getting people to vote, the neighborhood. That being said, this is not all he does. This is just an example of how he's decided to show old neighborhood Brooklyn, lifelong Brooklynite, person that connects to New York City and New York. So you think about what you get from this, those maybe adjectives to describe tried and true New Yorker, someone who's lived there for a long time, someone who is thinking about being like in your soul a New Yorker. And even the response talking about when I was a boy, look, he's grounded himself. I've lived here all my life. I've been here. I get that people stress about this particular train. This is actually called for those of you that aren't familiar with New York, this is called the breakup train. If you are dating someone that lives on this train line, your relationship will not last because it is that difficult to come across this train. So you see, this is for his audience. If you're not a New Yorker, this means nothing to you. He is targeting the people that follow him, that live in New York, that may be voting for him with this tweet. So in that sense, you can't always be selling, right? You've got to come up with like these different manners of how you are connecting to people. So starting with that easy action, we're going back to that ladder of engagement and involvement, like something, respond to a question, comment on something. It's kind of what Justin was doing there. He was making a statement. He didn't ask for a comment, but if you live in New York, particularly in Brooklyn, where you're affected by some of these things, you would have a response to it. So again, thinking about your audience, if you're in North Carolina, for example, if you're where I am in Winston-Salem, everybody's got some opinions about the downtown skyline, particularly of a building that is very phallic. So making a comment about that building that not necessarily, you're not trying to get a ching joke out there, but a comment about the skyline that might connect in a way that a local would understand. That's something to show a bit of your personality. And for those of you that don't know Winston, definitely look up Winston-Salem skyline and you will see what I'm talking about. So in that sense, you've got that easy action. It's not just let me disseminate information to you. It's here's something that you can respond to. Maybe it's a question. What are you fighting for? What are you looking for? For Renew this past weekend, I posted if you could wave a magic wand and change something on a state level, what would you change and why? Now, Renew is fighting for state level politics. Renew is fighting for bold changes. So that is very aligned with who we are. It's a question that doesn't involve them volunteering, giving money, giving time, signing up for something. It's out there to get them to think. after you've gotten some easy actions, then you can start signing them up for things. An email list is a great way because then you've gotten people who are like, yeah, I don't just follow you for your content. I actually want to know more. So having that consistent draw to an email list, to something that they can take a larger action on, really, really critical. And you can, when I say like having that and having it continuously show up, if you're just posting it once and you're posting it once and like, oh, no one signed up, most people have probably missed your post because of all of the different algorithms on each different platform. So when we get to the content calendar piece of it, when you organize, copy paste that. Maybe it's once a week you post about your mailing list. Maybe it's once every 2 weeks you post about your mailing list or a way to get involved. Cannot be once and one and done, because then you will not see these kinds of returns that you're looking to see, because everything is a cycle with your audience. And then finally, that's when you work up to asking for time or money. Generally speaking, asking for time or money in a social media post is probably not going to yield the best results. You want to get them on a more private space, on a more email type list. You can agitate them from there and you can see what might happen. But unless you're running one of these like really flashy viral campaigns that we're seeing where people are getting money donated from all over the place or getting volunteers from all over the place, you might not have a great return on that with social media. So I like to say it's not always the best thing to post asking for time or money. You want to get your audience going, get them signed up for something, and then you know they're bought in, so your ask rate will return better results. This is just recapping those rungs, thinking about awareness, connection, action, because when we're going into content calendars, and again, I'm going to drop this for everyone so you have a sample of this. For those of you that were in the campaign manager program, you have this. I have changed one column so you can really think of what it's diving into. I use content calendars so I can see what I've posted and I can organize my posts. So I will sit down and, here's the word, batch all of my content and schedule it on something like Hootsuite or Meet Edgar. Those are both platforms that I like and recommend. Hootsuite, you're able to get a free-ish version. You can't do all the bells and whistles. Meet Edgar, if you are leveling up your social media game, that's a really nice platform. But you can batch, meaning you're scheduling out, say, 9 days, 10 days of content. You sit down and you start digging in. So you see I've got a medium column, who owns it. If you're the only person running social media, that's you. If there are many people running social media, this way you can decide who is posting this, who is the person in charge of this, what's the title, what is the actual content or details. This fun, you can see my beginning, fun post, holiday, Happy New Year is pretty benign. If you're not commenting on something like that, then people wonder, are you actually an active social media account? So even if it seems exhausting to be like, Happy New Year, have a great year, everyone, program that out because it happens on the same day every year. Happy Valentine's Day, if that's something that resonates. Happy winter solstice. Days are going to start getting longer, whatever would hit with your audience. Audience, this one I put all because technically it is for everyone. I don't, again, recommend all of your posts being for all your audiences. What is the call to action? So what is the thing you're trying to do here? And what rung does it connect with? This rung I've added to this content calendar sample for folks, and you can just file, make a copy and keep it for yourself, adapt it in any way, add more columns. Because I truly believe that if you are not hitting one of these things, your social media post needs to not happen. Because then it's like, why are you posting? Just about everything. You can go through any like dream brand social media and you'll see it falls in one of these awareness, connection, action pieces. So that way you can see, oh, okay, it fits this one. Now, this is also a spectrum, I will say. So you might be like, ooh, this is awareness and connection. Or, ooh, this is connection and action. And that's great. Make sure it falls into at least one of them. And finally, before we see if folks have any questions, just some terms that I want to dig into, not really dig super hard. Batching If you're doing a lot of images and videos, do them all. A good tactic, I should say, this is not that end all be all tactic. Try to do a bunch of them on the same day. So say you've got the whole staff together and you want to do some videos about what terms mean because you're providing a civic education to some of your followers. Have everyone bring a couple different shirts, change shirts so it looks like they were filmed on another day, and knock out a couple of videos back to back to back to back. Then you've got this batch of content that you can schedule out through the month. Batching is also helpful for images. Say you have a photographer, come up with a shot list, or if you are the photographer and your iPhone camera, because iPhone cameras are beautiful, or Androids can be beautiful too. I'm like an iPhone junkie in that way with the camera. Have a shot list, take a bunch of pictures in one day. Then you've got a batch of images that you can schedule out throughout the month. Scheduling, anything that needs to be said, the norms, schedule it. If that's using the specific scheduler on like Facebook, if that's using another third-party app, that way you don't miss a day. Consistency is incredible for social media. The more you post, the more people see your posts, the more people will interact with your posts. Notice how I said consistency and not like post all the time. You don't need to post all the time. You need to post consistently. Is that once a day? Is that twice a week? Is that 4 times every 2 weeks? Whatever that looks like for you, stick to it, because then people know and they start learning to expect a post from you. I personally like to post on Facebook once a day and schedule those out. Like I'll start on Sunday, schedule the whole week out for Facebook posts, and then that's done. Because then if something happens or there's a conversation to be had, I can have time for that. That way join the program. Oh, here's a cool fact about someone who is in the program. Oh, here's an upcoming class that we have. Oh, that's scheduled because that's a norm. Conversations, this kind of work can be done when we have time. So that engaging at times, not all the time, scheduling yourself out maybe an hour and a half to like respond to other tweets, respond to other Facebook messages or Facebook posts, and really build that relationship. And then finally, and I've kind of hinted at this, don't aim for viral, aim for consistency. When you're on social media, you want to be the best version of yourself. You want that to be the best version of your brand voice. If you are having a bad day, don't post on social media because that will transition through. If you are having a bad day and you have to post on social media, read your post out loud. You should read it out loud no matter what, in my opinion, to make sure it sounds okay and see how it sounds. If your bad day is going through in that post, maybe that's not the best day to post, because we get the energy we put out. If you are putting out everything is awful, then that's the energy you get back. Yes, you can be realistic and think of why people are connecting with you. Are they connecting with you to doom scroll, or are they connecting with you for hope? All of that being said, I am going to say thank you to all the people that are watching this video at home. I'm going to stop the recording and see if our live studio audience has any questions. So thank you for everyone for watching. I'm going to stop the recording now.